So I'm so glad to welcome Tanya Garside. She was just saying to Denise and myself before we started that she used to live in the San Jose area, and she and her husband are originally from Wisconsin, or at least they grew up in Wisconsin and met there, and they've moved back just a few years ago back to Wisconsin. And she and her husband have written a beautiful book. It's called I Will Not Be Shaken: Devotions for People with Parkinson's and Care Partners. And I recently read it, and I think it's a lovely book. And Tanya has prepared a presentation for us, and we'll have, I'm sure, plenty of time for questions. So take it away, Tanya.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you today a little bit about this devotional. Um, I'll just give you a really quick agenda. I'm just going to introduce myself and Jeff and our little bit of our story, his diagnosis, the inspiration for writing this book, and the process of writing, which is a lot more than I ever thought it was going to be. And then we're just going to go through an example of one of the devotions and then time for question and answers afterwards. Um, like Robin showed you, here's a picture of the front cover of the devotional. Um, I really love this picture of the mountain. And then if you think about Parkinson's, the main thing that everybody thinks about with Parkinson's is shaking. And the mountains are just so solid and strong. And so that's kind of where the title came from with the picture in the background, is that I will not be shaken, even though people shake. But a fun little fact about this picture, we recently got to go on a trip to Switzerland, and Jeff took this picture himself. We were right there to take this picture. And so that was such a cool experience. Some of the other pictures that I have in the slideshow are also from Switzerland and our trip there.
Tanya,
Yes.
I think if you do a screen share,
Yes.
we'll be able to see the slide bigger and see the photo bigger.
Oh, I am screen sharing.
Yeah, she is screen sharing. It
Oh.
looks good to me.
Hmm.
Uh, does it look, uh, is Tanya's slide good size for other people? If other attendee, if some one of the attendees could let me know. It looks good on my end.
Mm.
If anybody could respond by the chat, maybe.
If I put it on speaker view, it looks good.
Oh,
Okay, we'll keep it there.
All right.
awesome.
I
Well,
think
thank
it's
you.
just a function of the host.
Um, So it's a little bit about Jeff and myself. We both grew up in Cedar Grove, Wisconsin. And just so you know, it's a tiny little farming community. It's about 2,000 people total. Um, so very tiny. I grew up in town. He grew up about 6 miles out of town on a farm, which is fun if you think about farming. Anyway, we grew up going to church. Youth group faith was a huge part of our lives. And at an early age, we both came to a belief in God and had that as a personal belief. We knew each other our entire lives. You always get the question, how did you meet? We have no idea, probably the elementary playground, but we didn't date until college. We were married in 1990. The first 6 years of our marriage, Jeff was a graduate student at Marquette University in pursuit of his PhD in electrical engineering. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later because he actually got to work in San Jose for a while. After he graduated from graduate school, I quit my job and I was a stay-at-home mom until all of our kids were school age. And that was a great thing for me, and for our family. We have three children, Jean-Luc, Amanda, and Catherine. So right now, our youngest, Catherine, is living with us here in Wisconsin. Our middle daughter, Amanda, lives in Texas, San Antonio, Texas, with her husband, who is in the Air Force. So they're going to move around all over the place. And our son, Jean-Luc, actually lives and works in Sunnyvale, where all of you are. About a year and a half after Jeff graduated from graduate school, from Marquette, we moved to Arizona for a job in a startup company for him. And we were there for 6 years. And Arizona was great. It helped us learn a lot, especially coming from a small community to go somewhere a little bit bigger. We were just outside of Phoenix. And then in 2004, we moved to San Jose. So going from this tiny little 2,000 person to 1 million people in San Jose was quite a change in our lives. He was working for SETI and he was a subcontractor to NASA. And then a year later, in 2005, he took a job just across the street at Lockheed Martin Space Systems. He worked for them until his retirement in 2024. We had already moved back to Wisconsin by that point. He was working remotely. So once all the kids were back in school or were in school, I went back to work and I was the business manager at San Jose Christian School. So I do accounting and bookkeeping and things like that. So a little bit about Jeff's diagnosis and the history of that. So Jeff was always a runner, cross country, track in high school. He would do small 2 miles or 5 miles. He's even run 2 half marathons in California. In late 2018, he started having problems with his left leg. It just wasn't working right. And he thought he had injured himself, like an IT injury or something like that. So he took a break from running and it seemed to get better. And he was even able to do a small, like 2 mile run with no problem. But then he tried to do something a little longer and the problems started coming back. And this was like into late 2019 or so. So he went to the doctor, as one does when you have a problem. But they couldn't find any physical reason for this happening. Like they couldn't tell. So they sent him to a specialist. And then they sent him to another specialist. And then, of course, 2020 happened and COVID shut down everything. He ended up going to a lot of different specialists before they figured something out. He had 5 MRIs. And finally, they sent him to a neurologist and they were able to get a DAT scan. One of the problems, however, is it was 2020 and COVID had shut everything down. And I was not able to go to any of these doctor's appointments with him. It was all of him by himself. But like I said, he was finally able to get a DAT scan and it came back with a definitive, you have Parkinson's. Neither one of us knew anything about Parkinson's. We didn't know anybody who had it. We didn't even know that there were support groups like the one that you guys have right now. We didn't have any idea that they existed. So, being a scientist, Jeff immediately started doing research about Parkinson's. I, however, had a little harder time wrapping my head around it, around the diagnosis, and I didn't really want to accept it as being reality. So we're going to go forward just a few years, and we decided to move back to Wisconsin. This was in 2022. We moved back to Wisconsin. Jeff was just thinking about getting ready for retirement. It's about 3 years after he was diagnosed, and he decided that he had some feelings and thoughts that just really weren't being addressed about Parkinson's. So he went on looking for a devotional or a Bible-based devotional that had to do specifically with Parkinson's. And he didn't find anything. Well, I shouldn't say he didn't find anything. He found a lot of great resources about Parkinson's and a lot of devotionals about other diseases as well. But he never found a devotional about Parkinson's. So part of our belief is that we are physical, we're social, we're intellectual beings, but we also have a spiritual component to us. And Jeff was looking for something that connected that physical side and that spiritual component that he was struggling with. about his Parkinson's. So it was then, when his search came up empty, that the Holy Spirit put it into his head that maybe he should write a devotional. By this time, Jeff had fully retired from Lockheed Martin, and so he threw himself into this project. He contacted a retired pastor that we know, and they sat down and they went to Starbucks to have coffee, but to talk about the devotional that he wanted to write. So now the pastor didn't know anything about Parkinson's either. And so that's one of the things that they got to talk about. He talked about Parkinson's, some of its symptoms, its side effects, and they were able to have a great conversation about that. Then he went through the Bible and looked for passages that had to do with the symptoms of Parkinson's. And as all of you know, there are a ton of symptoms that nobody ever talks about. Everybody thinks about the shaking hands, but they don't talk about anything else, like the lack of smell, balance, things like that, unless you're part of a support group, of course. So he started going through the Bible and looking for passages that had to do with the symptoms of Parkinson's. I do see a question here in the chat, defining by what I mean by a devotional. And that's a great question. So to us, a devotional is you read a passage of scripture, and then there's a little meditation about that passage, a prayer, and then in our particular case with the devotional we wrote, is there's a prompt for you to journal your feelings and thoughts about what the topic was of that day. These are very short, just one-page things, and we're actually going to do an example one a little further on in the talk. So after Jeff went through the Bible passages and found what he was looking for, it was on to the writing. So some of the topics, just so you know, are the symptoms, of course, side effects, mortality, care partner challenges, dignity, what does the future hold? There's a lot of different topics. So then the next thing Jeff was thinking about is what kind of style should this devotion be? And he chose, if any of you are familiar with what it's called Words of Hope, and it's also a little devotional. And it's what I was just talking about in structure. It has a short little passage from the Bible, and then it has a meditation, the person who wrote it, on their thoughts about that passage with, like I said, a prayer. And in this one, it also has a care partner thing, which is what we are here talking about today. And then the journaling prompt, like I talked about. So the writing process for the book began. And Jeff would say it took a long time. But in reality, he wrote over 100 devotional days in just over a month and a half. So in my opinion, it went very quickly. Now, if you've noticed, so far I've talked about Jeff's writing and everything that he did for this devotional. I was not really fully on the same page as he was about writing a devotional. And now he wanted me to put a care partner note on every single day of this devotional. And I was terrified. First off, I felt like a fraud. And I'll explain what I mean. Jeff's symptoms are not that bad. He's early on in his diagnosis. It's only been just about 5.5 years. So he has shaking and he takes his medication. But as a care partner, I do very little to help him at this point in time. He is fully capable of doing most of the stuff himself. So I kind of felt like a fraud when he wanted me to put these care partner thoughts in this devotional. What do I know? I do so little yet for him. But then I realized that I have access to a great deal of information. So shortly after we moved back to Wisconsin, we joined a Parkinson's support group. I'm sure very much like the one that you guys have in your Palo Alto group. And from there, we break out our group into people with Parkinson's and the care partners. And we have once a month a time that we can sit and talk together as care partners. And because of them, I realized I had a lot of information, even if I haven't lived it, but things that they have gone through and have shared with the rest of the group. And I know one of the prompts that Denise had sent out when we were first talking about this time was, what have I learned so far as a care partner? I don't want to say caregiver because I really don't give a whole lot of care at this point yet. But what have I learned so far? So I'd like to share that for just a minute. Some of the things from our support group that I have found really valuable. One of the things that everybody I've talked to said is you can't do it alone. You need a support group. You need help. You need family. You need somebody else to come alongside you. There's no one size fits all solution. It just doesn't happen. There are so many different symptoms, and everybody has a different mix of those symptoms. So not every solution matches every single person. And you have to find what matches your specific challenges. Another thing they've often talked about is seeing Parkinson's from the perspective of the person with Parkinson's. So for me, seeing life through Jeff's eyes for his struggles. Kind of funny, but one of the things that one of the ladies in our group talked about is she noticed that people stopped touching her husband, like holding his hand or touching his shoulder, because as soon as they found out he had Parkinson's, suddenly nobody wanted to even be close to him or give him a hug. So one of the things that she really encouraged is that it doesn't matter. Give him a hug, hold his hand. The Parkinson's is just a disease. It doesn't mean that he is anything bad. So not to avoid the person just because of the disease. Another person had shared with us that we need to remember that a lot of the things that happen are the disease. It's not the choice of the person to be that way. So we have to remember as care partners that it is the disease and not to get mad at the person. And I think one of my favorite ones is that we have to care for the whole person. Jeff is still my husband and I love him dearly. So I am not going to care for him only because of his disease. I'm going to care for his whole person. The two last things that I wanted to say that from my Parkinson's care partner group that other people have shared with me is to get help if you need it, even if it's just for a few hours. We had one lady whose husband was having severe hallucinations and she just needed to go to the grocery store, but she couldn't even take him anymore to the store. So for her, she just took like an hour and a half. She had somebody come into her home to be with her husband when she was gone so that nothing would happen, but to get help if you need it just for a little bit of time. And then finally, have some of these hard conversations early and not wait to have them. And that's kind of what I wanted to touch base a little further on with our devotional book. So back to the finishing of the book. I wrote the care partner section, just like Jeff asked me to. He gave it to a number of people to edit and review, and finally he was able to get it self-published on Amazon. So that talks about the why and the how. I don't know about you, but we don't usually sit down and just talk about our feelings and what we're thinking about the struggles with Parkinson's. And so that's one of the things about the devotional that I really appreciated, and we really wanted to stress as we talk to people. Part of the devotional has at the bottom a journaling prompt, and a lot of them are about how do you feel about this in Parkinson's, or how do you feel or think about that? And what we've discovered is, even though we wrote it, we have been doing the devotional together day by day again. And it's helped us have some of these hard conversations. It's prompted us to have discussions that we never even knew we needed to have. And it's brought up topics that we didn't know we needed to discuss. And I'll just give one little quick example of that. My dishwasher is very close to the cabinet where Jeff's medicine is kept. And so when the dishwasher is done, I open the door and let it air dry. But it became a tripping hazard for him as he was going to get his medication. And it never crossed my mind. And it actually came up in one of our devotional discussions about the dishwasher. Something I would have never thought about. He never thought about telling me about it. And so it's been really a good thing to bring up stuff that we never thought we could talk about or needed to talk about. And it's also helped me see Parkinson's from Jeff's perspective, instead of just looking at it from my perspective. So I thought maybe we would just go on and do an example of one of the days of the devotional. I have part of it written here on the page for you to see, and then I am also going to read it out of the book itself. So this one is, it's labeled as day 28, well, 29, and it's called Joy in Trials. In the book of James, chapter 1, verses 2 to 4, it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you can be mature and complete, not lacking anything." So the author who wrote this, James, is talking to first century Christians. And with regards to the trials that they were facing it just for having faith in God at all, faith in Christ. They were facing persecution. They were facing death. They were facing their material possessions being taken away, being thrown in jail. These were the trials that these people were facing. And in the book, Jeff writes that these trials are far worse than anything he experiences, especially with Parkinson's. But Parkinson's definitely falls into the category of a trial. So if we get back to these first century Christians and the trials they're facing, James in this passage exhorts them to consider their encounter with those trials to be pure joy. Pure joy. I mean, how is that possible? So he's exhorting them to embrace their trials with joy. But why? And it's because the trials are designed to accomplish what they're designed to accomplish in the Christian's life. Testing and trials are intended to develop perseverance. And perseverance roots the Christian deeper into Christ, which then produces maturity. And that's what it talks about in this passage. And as you see underneath, there's a prayer that Jeff wrote, but it's asking God to help us be joyful about this trial of Parkinson's and to persevere toward maturity. For the care partner, I responded, this is a real challenge. The challenge to take joy in Parkinson's, but it's one that God can help us to accept and appreciate over time. And the one thing I really wanted to emphasize here are the prompts, this journaling prompt. For one thing, with Parkinson's, because of the shaking, your partner should be writing and writing big, the whole big and loud thing. So journaling is actually a great thing for practice. Sometimes when Jeff journals our stuff, we can't read it again, but I do encourage him to still journal. So this particular prompt says to journal about the good things in your life that you would not have experienced if you had never been diagnosed with Parkinson's. So just as a real quick, if you're thinking about it and would like to type it in the chat, what is something good that has happened in your life because of Parkinson's? And I'll just give a minute for that. For us in particular, it's the care partner group, or I'm sorry, the Parkinson's support group, which I'm very thankful for the care partner side of that. But our support group is something we would never have encountered. These are people we would not really have met. We don't run typically in the same circles. And I love that, what Robin is saying in the chat, lifelong friends, exactly. And that's just something that would not have occurred without Parkinson's being a diagnosis. So that's just one example of something positive. Another thing for us is writing the devotional together was a real positive thing. So I think I'll take the time real quick to just go through another just devotional. And this one speaks more on my side of it, I think, than Jeff's. But day 76. In Psalm, this is David crying out to the Lord, "You, Lord, are forgiving and good." Oops. "Abounding in love to all who call on you. Hear my prayer, Lord. Listen to my cry for mercy. When I am in distress, I call to you because you answer me." So Psalm 86 is a psalm from David, and he's pouring out a deeply emotional plea to God. He's asking God, when I'm in distress, I call to you and hear me, listen to me, answer me. So many of us long for that kind of relationship with anybody, to be heard and to be answered. But because of having a relationship with Christ and having a belief and a faith, I can offer up this same prayer when I'm struggling. And it's wonderful to know that I can use these same words. I don't even have to come up with words of my own, which sometimes is hard too. And I can just call out to God using this verse. But I'm just going to read from the devotional what Jeff wrote about it. "It's wonderful to know that I can personally utter these words, especially when Parkinson's disease is tempting me to make sinful responses to my trial. Sometimes I yield to frustration and anger. Other times I react to the physical challenges or other side effects with weariness and in less than a godly manner. Prescription expenses, doctor visits, therapy sessions all create opportunities to worry. And instead of casting my cares upon the Lord, I worry. Especially at sometimes it's a wonderful blessing to realize that as a Christian, I can call to God and get a same response like David, because God answers me." As you can see with the prayer, "Hear me, O Lord, and answer me, for I am poor and needy. Sometimes, some days, Parkinson's disease gets the better of me. So I ask for your mercy and your grace to get through the day." And there are days, as I wrote here in the as the care partner response, there are days when Jeff's Parkinson's disease gets the better of me too. And I'm very thankful that I can also cry out and get my deepest feelings out there. I can talk about it with God and I can talk about it with Jeff. So finally, on the prompt on here, and if you would like to answer, that's okay. Journal about the prayers you have offered up to the Lord over the course of your struggle with Parkinson's and the way he has been faithful to answer. And again, I'll just give a moment for that if you wanted to put anything in the group chat. One of the ways that we have found God to be faithful in our journey in Parkinson's disease was actually the support group that we came to find. Like I had said earlier, we had no idea about any support groups or anything like that. And Jeff happened to walk into the hardware store here in our small little town, and there was a flyer, a poster talking about the Parkinson's support group. And so we went. And so we found that to be very, very God being faithful to us in what we needed at that time. So that's all I had to share with you today. If you have any questions, I am more than happy to answer them. If there's something I didn't explain or you want more information.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Maybe you could stop sharing your slides just so we get a bigger picture of you and all your glory. Tracy answered, one of our attendees answered the last journaling prompt. She says, he has given me my circle of support from Christian friends and family.
Absolutely. They're up at the top.
Yeah. I have and if others have questions or comments, you can either use the chat or the Q&A. Oh, I see here's a question. Let me get rid of all this stuff that's in my way. Oh my goodness. Um, have your adult children participated in the devotional?
That's a great question too. Yes, they have. Mostly our middle daughter, Amanda. She is a registered nurse. So for her, this is right up her alley in talking about a disease. But she was actually one of the proofreaders and editors of the devotional herself. And she was the reason we even knew that Amazon did self-publishing. So our other children have also participated and read it, but she was the one who definitely jumped on board with the whole devotional book.
And it looks like a Tracy who you mentioned before, who we mentioned before, says, I know Tanya from Walk to Emmaus.
Emmaus?
Yes. And
Ah,
it's Tracy from California.
yes, that was a group we were a part of.
Yeah, nice. Um, You talk in the book, and again, I mentioned before we got started, and I have mentioned in my email, I'm not a religious person, but I still found a lot of interesting values, a lot of wisdom in the book. I mostly focused on your caregiver response and on the on the journaling prompts because those I could relate to. And you mentioned that one thing early on is that you tried not to put Jeff's diagnosis of Parkinson's disease as a permanent cloud over your lives, and that you have tried to see beyond that. Could you say a little bit more again?
I think mostly like we did move back to Wisconsin and he did retire, and a lot of it had to do because of Parkinson's, but also a lot of it so that we can spend what time we have doing stuff together, traveling, actually, we've tried to do now when we can and not let Parkinson's stand in the way of that in particular, in that case. But really, just to not let it define who we are is the biggest thing that we've tried to do, or not to do with Parkinson's.
Yeah. In one of the devotionals or meditations, you talk about seeing your husband suffering from Parkinson's disease and also seeing your own body aging. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Just the whole process of getting older. I mean, we all have the aches and pains. And um, I think for me, the struggle was watching him, especially before we had a formal diagnosis, with not being able to run or not being able to figure out why and what this was going on. But then when the shaking started in his hand, and we still didn't have the diagnosis of that, just watching him trying to deal with that and not having anything I could do.
Mm, yeah. Uh, that sounds very challenging. I know it's challenging, has been challenging for you, and it's challenging for every
It
person
is.
with a diagnosis and every family member or loved one in their circle.
I don't
Um,
know if your support group does it, but our support group here recently had a friends and family event
oh,
where
that's
they
nice.
invited people, or you got to invite your friends and family, and we had a neurologist come and speak to everybody. And it was eye-opening. I mean,
Hmm.
we had had some of that information already, but to share that with our friends and family, it was
Hmm,
great.
nice, nice. You talk in one of the devotionals about having to, quote, gently open your husband's eyes when he lost some perspective. Could you give maybe an example of that?
Um, Trying to think of an exact example. One of the things, and I think some of it has to do with his personality, he gets very focused on one idea. For instance, writing this devotional. And where he thought a month and a half was a very long time, I'm thinking a month and a half to write an entire book is pretty short. Um, and things like that, actually, that would be one example of having to open his eyes to not being so focused on just one thing that everything else around is just kind of getting lost. Um, yeah, he got just very much into the book. Thankfully, it was winter and there wasn't really a lot to do outside anyway.
Hmm, right. Um, let's see. You mentioned in the book REM sleep behavior disorder and Jeff's nightmares. Could you talk a little bit about dealing with that symptom?
Sure. Um, so I'm sure all of you know that one of the things is Parkinson's people can act out their dreams and nightmares. And Jeff is one of those people that it happens to. So he will, during the night, yell or scream. But the hardest one is when I get kicked because he's thinking about whatever his dream happens to be. Um, One of the things that we have chosen to do to deal with it is to get a bigger bed. It's kind of a very simple solution, really, but that way there's more space. And eventually, maybe we'll have to go to two beds. I don't know. But for right now, that's how we are dealing with this part of his Parkinson's.
Hmm. Someone asked if Jeff has restless leg syndrome.
Not like that hasn't been diagnosed as being something. It's really just more when he's sleeping.
Okay. Um, you mentioned in the book about Jeff considering deep brain stimulation therapy. What have been your thoughts and his thoughts about that?
At this point, we have looked into it a little bit. Like I said, our group had some neurologists come and speak, and we did have the opportunity to talk directly with one of the neurologists about it. His symptoms don't really seem to lend themselves right now to being worth the risk of going through the deep brain stimulation. Maybe in the future, but for right now, we, after talking with the neurologist, have decided to just stick with the carbidopa levodopa that everybody seems to take.
Hmm. And does your husband take any other medication besides carbidopa levodopa at this time?
Not for his Parkinson's. He does still do like multivitamins, vitamin D and vitamin B. I think the doctor has him also taking. I did notice on here somebody had asked about the melatonin. Um, he actually doesn't do melatonin very much. And that's exactly, it could help with or create the acting out of the dreams more, but he does have trouble sleeping. So there's a real balance to that on
Hmm.
how much to take and whether to take it or not.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, how long you've mentioned many times the local support group. How far away is it from your home? Is it or do you
It's a,
guys meet virtually?
no, it's actually like I said, our town is very small. It's like
Yeah.
about a mile by a mile. Um,
Okay.
it's at a local church. It's probably half a mile from our house.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
And how many attendees are there normally?
On a normal month, we'll get about 50.
Oh my goodness. In a
Yes,
small
and
town like that, 50 people. Wow.
well, and the thing is, it reaches out to the entire county. And we have people drive 20, 30 minutes, which I know in California, everything is 20 or 30 minutes away because when we lived there, that's what it was. Here, not as much, but people come for the support,
Uh,
definitely. And
wow.
on events like the one I talked about with the friends and family, we had over 100.
Hmm. Hmm. Good
So
heavens.
I
That's
know it was
incredible.
amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. Um, Denise says your book is an excellent resource to open communication between the person with Parkinson's and the caregiver. I love the special friends and family meeting time.
Yeah, it definitely has opened, even though we wrote it, now that we're going through it together again,
Hmm.
um, it just really sparks communication between us that we never think about talking about at other
Hmm.
times.
One of the things you mention in the book is having conversations about the inevitable. Could you talk a little bit about that?
The inevitable things that we have heard moving forward, eventually needing a walker or a cane, um, perhaps being bedridden at some point. How are we going to handle that? Um, when we moved to Wisconsin, the house that we live in, that you can see my basement, um, we built. And we built it specifically so that at the time when he will have a walker or a wheelchair or something like that, all the doorways are big enough. We have very low carpet or linoleum type flooring. So we had some of those conversations early on what are the things that are going to happen that we need to deal with, and can we deal with any of it now and not have to think about it for the future.
Hmm.
So those are some of the inevitable things that we know will come.
Right. One of the things you mention in the book, perhaps inevitable, and some people get it and some people don't, was hallucinations. You have Jeff has a concern about developing hallucinations, and it seemed you had a concern also about his developing them. Has he experienced any of these yet, or at all?
No,
No. Okay.
not at all. And we actually asked the doctor about it, the neurologist, and he said he thought that he didn't think that Jeff's was going to get the hallucination side of it. Um, I'm not sure how they base that, but I'm not a neurologist. So we did actually ask our doctor about it. That was
Hmm.
one thing I actually forgot to say as far as a care partner is actually going to the doctor's appointments.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I start with him starting it out during COVID, I didn't go to anything and I kind of got in that bad habit. So I was strongly encouraged by my support group to make sure to go to all of the appointments with him so
Mm-hmm.
I can hear what he's hearing at the same time.
Do you attend a separate support group just for care partners, or does your main group divide up into those with the diagnosis and care partners in separate spaces?
Yes. So it's
Mm-hmm.
about, we meet monthly. Every other month, we have a speaker. And then on the other months that we don't have a speaker, our group divides out. And so the people with Parkinson's go to one room and the care partners go to another. And then the care partners themselves actually break into men and women
Mm-hmm.
because there are just different needs. And so it's a great time. I've learned so much from these women that I would not have known.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful. One thing I was very interested in that you said is that you, in the book, that you want your husband to include you on decisions about medications, the use of a cane, and other therapies because all of these things affect you. How does he feel about that? That you want to be involved in those decisions?
He was actually the one who encouraged it
Mhm.
because it does affect both of us, but also I can then encourage him to be doing what he needs to be doing. But it goes both ways. Um, I have things in my life too, other things that he needs to keep on me for. So
Mhm.
it's a two-way street in that respect. But the book
Okay.
doesn't reflect that.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. You're right. I'm wondering if your priorities in your caregiving role or care partner role have changed at all over the last several years since Jeff's been dealing with Parkinson's disease.
Not very much. Like I said, his symptoms are very early on and they have not progressed a lot.
Hmm.
The most I think for me as a care partner has been right now learning more about the disease and about the symptoms to prepare myself for when that time comes.
Hmm.
But yeah, his symptoms right now are, I make sure to carry his medication. That's about the biggest thing that I have right now.
Okay. All right. Um, and in the book, you note the importance of caring for yourself as the care partner, the caregiver. What do you do to care for yourself?
Not as much as I should. No. Exercise and trying to eat better, which actually is for both of us, trying to
Hmm.
cook. And we went to a symposium that actually struck me about eating whole foods, like cooking versus processed foods. And so it helps him, but it also helps me too. But I think most of it is just the getting out, trying to get the exercise. Um, I am not in great shape, but better than I had been in the past. So
Hmm.
we're working on that.
And what kinds of things does Jeff do for himself? Is he still exercising a lot?
Very faithfully, much more
Mm.
so. We have a treadmill here at our house, so he doesn't have to go outside and he can do it year round. We've done weights. We have like a rowing machine so that that works a little bit with if there's any balance issues going on, and also like a stationary bike. Those things
Mhm.
seem to help um, even on days that maybe are worse than others.
Mhm. Worse mean in terms of PD symptoms.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well,
I
and
imagine,
weather.
and weather, yeah. I imagine both, yeah. Let's see, so Denise says, some people find going to a support group early after Parkinson's diagnosis to be overwhelming. Were you going to the support group meetings regularly before realizing that input from PD caregivers would be helpful in writing that section of the book?
Um, Yes, we were going to the group faithfully before that. Um, so when we moved back, we moved back in like end of April, early May. Jeff started going to the support group in June. That's how soon he had heard about it after our being back. I didn't start going with him until September. So when the school year kind of started up. And so that was in 2022. And he didn't even start having thoughts about writing the book until late 23, early 24.
Mhm.
So we were
Have
part of the
either of
group.
have either of you found the group to be overwhelming in the sense of seeing people with PD or hearing about caregivers dealing with people with PD with more serious symptoms?
Sometimes, yeah, it's hard to see some of that. Um, and to hear, I don't get to hear from all of the caregivers since some of them are men and they meet separately than we do. But it is hard to see some of the people that are very far in their diagnosis. For instance, that lady I referenced before with her husband having hallucinations, they were part of the group until just recently when he passed away. And
Mm.
so she no longer comes to the group. Although we have invited her, we're like, you have such a wealth of knowledge. We'd love to have you here,
Sure,
but
yeah.
it's too hard for her right now.
Yeah. And has it similarly been sometimes challenging for Jeff to be among people who are further declined than he is?
I think so. He hasn't specifically mentioned that being a difficulty.
Hmm.
Um, but we have really made some really good friends.
Yeah, that sounds like it. That's wonderful. Um, One thing you mentioned also in the book is the need to be patient and encouraging when communication has become difficult. Um, can you say how Jeff's communication abilities have been affected and why it may now be a little bit more difficult than before?
Sure. One of the things that I have noticed more so in recent years or the recent year or so is the whole masking. We're not showing the emotion. And then also kind of the almost that he's not listening. He's not hearing what I have to say. Almost, I don't want to say spaced out, but just not responsive. Um,
Hmm.
I get very frustrated with stuff like that. And I have to remember that he's not doing this on purpose. And so
Hmm.
I need to try to be patient when I'm talking. Don't give him too many thoughts or too many things at one time, to slow down. But also to be encouraging that if he is having that particular kind of day, um, to not get mad and to
Hmm.
just,
Hmm.
go focus on something else.
Hmm.
It's not that important right now.
Hmm.
So that's something I've had to learn
Hmm.
as we've started this little bit of the process.
Hmm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Somebody asked, how is Jeff's sense of taste and smell, and how does he handle it if these are compromised?
They are. And had we known that was a Parkinson's symptom, we probably would have caught it years before he actually went to a neurologist because his sense of smell has been going for a long time. I do like to joke, and he laughs at it too, that it's a good thing his sense of taste is going away because I am not a great cook.
Hmm.
But it's kind of our little joke to just make some light of it. But yeah, his sense of smell is almost completely gone, and his taste also is declining.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, we've reached the end of my long list of questions. Does anybody else have a question? You could put it in the chat or the Q&A box, whichever one, or question or comment. That's fine, either one. Well, I don't see anything, so I think we'll conclude here. Tanya, I
All
want
right.
to thank you for your role in writing the caregiver care partner response in the devotions book. I think it for me as a former caregiver, veteran caregiver, added a nice element to the book. And I thought that the journaling prompts, as I said before, were wonderful. And I really appreciate your coming today and sharing your presentation and answering the questions. And you've been so open and open and honest with people about your life and Jeff's life. I really admire that and appreciate so much. And somebody says, thank you so much for modeling an almost ideal way of partnering through a very difficult disease. And I think that's a perfect way to end our day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you.
Loved it, Tanya. Thank you.
All
And if
right.
you'd email us your slides, that'd be wonderful. Somebody mentioned that they'd like to have your slides, and with your permission, we'll post them to our website.
Of course.
Great. Thank you so much. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone. See you next time. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.